Okay, we're good. Yep, yep. So, yeah, thanks, Lynn. As she said, I'm Laurence Browning. I work at Natural England. I'm a senior marine officer in the Cumbria team. And yeah, today I'm going to give you a brief introduction to marine protected areas, which I'm going to abbreviate to MPAs from now on, of the northwest of England. So I'll give you some basic facts about MPAs, what they are, what they protect, and how they protect it. And I'll also cover the MPAs that we have in the waters off the northwest of England, their place in the context of the wider marine ecosystem, and therefore how NWME could be relevant to them, what the role of the MPA community of practice could be. So starting from the basics, this is sort of the general working definition of MPAs as we have it. MPAs being geographical areas of the marine environment established and managed to achieve long-term nature conservation and sustainable use. So I've underlined a few words there that do I need? Am I loud enough for everyone? Ah, the AC. Okay. Yeah, we'll try and point the mic away from the AC. Yeah, so underlined words. Words to think about as I'm going through. I'm going to revisit some of those themes during the talk. So bear those in mind. So straight into it, the first kind of broad collection of MPAs are ones that are international. So they came about through international legislation that the UK government signed up to, or other international voluntary commitments as well. Firstly, special areas of conservation. These provide protection to habitats and species that are considered most at need at the European level. The sites are designated by DEFRA, so central government, and they're based on their importance for these features for the habitats and species. They're designated under the EU Habitats Directive, which was adopted into UK legislation as the Habitats Regulations. We've retained that bit of EU law since Brexit, so it's largely the same as it ever was. The next type of MPA is special protection areas. These protect birds and habitats that they depend on. And they're classified based on their importance for supporting significant numbers of birds or assemblages of various bird species. Same as with SPAs, SACs, SPAs came from EU legislation, the Birds Directive, and is adopted and has been retained into UK law. Both of these were and sometimes still are, therefore, referred to as European sites, but they should now be called national sites. So we have a network of national sites as the general term for these designations. Otherwise, the protection that they're afforded remains much the same under what we typically abbreviate to as the HABS regs when we're bored of saying the whole thing. The last international type of MPA that I'm going to talk about is Ramsar wetland sites, and these are protected under the Ramsar Convention. It's just named after the place that it was agreed, and these are wetlands of international importance. As you might imagine, the intertidal areas that we have in the northwest comprise a lot of these wetlands, so there's a considerable overlap with the SPAs and SACs. Features may differ slightly, and they're treated by Natural England and regulators in the same way as we treat national sites. So that's SACs and SPAs for those who've been following. We also have MPAs that are designated solely under pieces of domestic legislation, so just UK legislation. Sites of special scientific interest, so that's your SSIs, they're notified by Natural England, and they protect the best sites for wildlife and other natural features in the country. They often overlap with and underpin national sites. They're not really a marine designation. There aren't any fully marine SSIs, but they can contribute to the wider marine protected area network. Lastly, we've got marine conservation zones. These are the most recent type of MPA to come into existence. They're the only solely marine designation, so they're all from mean high water to seaward. They're designated by DEFRA again. Unlike all of the other designations that we've covered so far, these are recommended by stakeholder groups of sea users, NGOs, regulators, and advisory bodies like NE. So they consider socioeconomics as well as ecology within the initial recommendation. And the last little bit there, which I'm going to come back to, is highly protected marine areas, which are a type of MCZ. They protect the entire marine ecosystem within their boundaries. So in the Northwest, don't worry, I'm not going to read through all of these. This is a summary of how those different MPA designations pan out. In total, that means 40 MPAs just in English waters, just in the Northwest, which I think is quite an impressive figure. I think it's something we can take pride in, and it shows that the marine ecosystem in the Northwest is important, it's worthy of protection, and it needs protection. This is what they all look like if you just stick them on a map of the region. In fact, they're so tightly packed that at the scale required to see the whole region, you can't see all of the underpinning triple SI designations because there's so many of those underneath the other protected sites. As you can see, there's barely a kilometre of our coastline that is not protected in some way. There are little bits for the eagle-eyed. And much of the sea area also receives protection. These sites form part of what's referred to as the MPA network. The ambition of UK government is that we have an ecologically coherent and well-managed network of MPAs. That language comes from the OSPAR Convention, which is just an international conservation agreement which applies that wording across the whole of the Northeast Atlantic. So we're making a contribution to a bigger picture. As of 2019, with the designation of the final tranche of the MCZs, the network was considered by DEFRA in a review to be substantially complete. So at this point, if you just think back to some of the key words that I underlined in the definition and consider whether you would agree with that. There's obviously a substantial spatial coverage of MPAs, so it's certainly been established as a network. How well do people think they're managed? How could we tell if they're going to be effective long term? Can't see into the future. Now, I'll leave you thinking about those while I explain the railway map. This is the type of thing that comes to my mind when I think about the concept of a network. So it's a set of nodes with some connections running between them. In the case of MPAs, most of the designations, which would be the nodes, I suppose, protect specific features in specific areas and to different degrees and through different methods. So the nodes themselves, they vary greatly in size, they often overlap, and they do different things. So to me, I think it looks more like a patchwork quilt. And I think you'll agree that that looks a bit more like the map on the previous slide than a rail network does. And we can also use this as a bit of an aspiration or an inspiration. We want our quilt of MPAs to be strong and protective. It's also the work of many people coming together. Whilst it's a bit messy, all the parts of it should work together to cover any gaps. And of course, like this particular quilt, the MPA network also contains whales. See if you can spot them. So whether you think of it as a network or a patchwork, that might just be me. 2 minutes, but I'm going to go over because I didn't know there was 5 minutes for questions. Sorry, you can catch me in the break. The intent of MPAs is to protect, to prevent negative impacts to their features. They have a legal basis for protection, as I've summarised, and that means there are processes in place to ensure those impacts are prevented or mitigated or compensated for should they happen anyway. Some of these legal bases have been well tested through decision-making processes, through case law, and newer types such as MCZs are a bit less well tested, although there's developments in the pipeline that could test this and put us on firmer ground when we're thinking about them. And this really brings us to the question of well managed. So by way of example, fishing is widely understood to be one of the activities with the most potential for environmental impacts in the marine environment, in large part because it's a chronic activity. These impacts are repeated over and over through time. The historic images of fishing from the early and mid 20th century that we've got up here should serve to illustrate just how long industrialized fishing has been having impacts in English waters. So just over a decade ago, a couple of NGOs, Client Earth and the Marine Conservation Society, challenged the way that fisheries are treated within MPAs, which led to a revised approach where all fisheries in MPAs have to be assessed and managed if needed to reduce their impacts, like any other activity. You may be aware of this recent consultation and announcement from the Marine Management Organisation, and this is around banning bottom-towed gear from certain MPAs, 4 of which on that tiny map are within the region that we're interested in here. This is a direct result of this revised approach, as is the management that the North Western IFCA already has for a number of other inshore sites in the region. There are more stages of this process planned to bring this management approach to more of the MPAs all around the country. Of course, we need to remember fisheries aren't the only impactful activity. As I said, it's an example, so it's important to acknowledge that many activities can impact MPAs. All this is to say that ensuring the network is well managed is something that requires continued effort into the future to keep up with these changes to the environment, to our understanding of the MPAs, to our understanding of impacts to features and changes to activities in the sites. So in order to function then, MPAs need these things from us. As discussed, they need management. It's a defining aspect of MPAs. We also need a way of telling whether our management's effective. We need monitoring of the features of the MPAs and the ecosystems they sit within so that we know how they're changing and thus can make assessments of their condition so we know what condition these sites are in. And they really need understanding among the public stakeholders, decision makers. It's vital to the effective management of these sites. Natural England produces standing conservation advice packages toward this end, but active engagement is often much more effective. Lastly, we need a robust marine ecosystem. So this is the context that all of these sites sit within and depend upon. Natural England, our role is to advise on all of these factors and the regulators that are responsible for implementing a lot of them. And our aim is to bring more of the sites and features into favourable condition. Now, MPAs can't do everything. Being feature-based introduces a bias into the ecosystem components that we take an interest in and which impacts we're concerned about. Geographically bounded protection measures make management for things like mobile species extremely difficult. They may only live out part of their life cycle in one place, and we can protect that key part, but not the whole thing. I think we've done well in marine conservation to cram what took 50 years of progress in terrestrial conservation into the last 15 years or so with that big program of designations. But this also means the task of monitoring and assessment of our MPAs has grown hugely, and it isn't realistically achievable everywhere. There's just too much to do. Lastly, we have only one site in the region where we're trying to understand the entire ecosystem in the marine environment and protect it. But this can be useful in the context of this group, to look at what such an undertaking entails, because it's the Northwest ecosystem. So very quick reminder about Allenby Bay HPMA. The purpose of it is to provide the highest level of protection possible across the whole site, preventing any damaging activities from impacting the ecosystem. Across this slide and the next one, various images from the HPMA, and this is just to illustrate the breadth of the ecosystem components that we're seeking to understand in this site. To do that, we've had this major program of survey work to establish the baseline understanding of the site, and this is a non-exhaustive list of the survey effort so far that we've been undertaking to achieve this. Again, I'm not going to read the list out, but it should give you an appreciation of the variety of things that we need to look at. And you could look at this as a incomplete, but a wish list of what you try to achieve across the whole region to gain an understanding of the whole Northwest marine ecosystem. Clearly, it wouldn't be possible to replicate this type of effort across the whole region at the resolution that we have in this basically 5 by 5 kilometre square. But I do think that collectively, the NWME project can build toward a similar picture for the region by using some of the connections that we have available to us here. So I think tentatively that the NWME project and the needs of MPAs can be synergized through the intent of NWME, which is to